Professor Sweet has taught African and African diasporic history in the department since 2004. His path-breaking scholarship emphasizes slavery, race, and nation in their broader Atlantic world contexts. He is the author of 2 award-winning books, Recreating Africa, Culture, Kinship, and Religion in the African-Portuguese World, 1441 to 1770, and most recently, Domingos Alvarez, African Healing in the Intellectual History of the Atlantic World. In addition to his research and teaching, Professor Sweet recently completed a 3-year term as chair of the history department. And as I mentioned, he's delivering his commencement address upon the recommendation of the undergraduate history class of 2017. I can add one more personal remark. Jim and I, a few years ago, realized that some 60 or 70 years ago, our grandfathers were probably in the same tiny rural Florida town at the same time. This is even today a one-stoplight town. I can't imagine what it was like when our grandfathers were young. But it is a small world. I'd like to welcome Professor Jim Sweet.
It still stuns me that you guys picked me to do this. What's wrong with you? I'm serious. I'm used to, the last couple of years it was, I think, John Hall and Lou Roberts. Yeah, my mic is on. Thank you, Scott. I love you. I really am deeply honored. It was John Hall, it was Lou Roberts. Those are people who I look up to as colleagues and as teachers. Real teachers. I don't see myself in that league, but I'm going to, try to do my best here today. I really can't think of a greater honor, and it's fun for me to be able to speak to you guys one last time. So thanks for giving me the opportunity. Parents, you've already heard, and you're probably horrified to learn that your kids chose me to be the commencement speaker, primarily because I taught a class called Drunk History. Before you run to your state legislator or CNN, I'd point out that almost half of the students in that class ended up submitting their papers for publications or prizes, a couple of which you saw just given. Among the things I love about history, it teaches us to turn absurdity into opportunity, madness into grace. These are lessons that I try to impart to my students every chance I get. Let me explain why. I grew up in a working class neighborhood in North Carolina with my mother and 2 younger brothers. My father wasn't around. Few of my role models had earned college degrees. They were electricians, roofers, truck drivers, bartenders, secretaries, and store clerks. But they were also our football coaches, our Sunday school teachers, and our mentors. They urged us to succeed. We were a strong, tight-knit community, but there was also a lot of pain and suffering in the community I grew up in. Alcoholism, drug abuse, suicides, young people committing suicide. The majority of my friends followed their parents into the trades or service industries, but too many of them ended up addicted, in jail, or dead. I carry those people with me always when I teach. When I went to University of North Carolina as a freshman, I intended to study business. Like STEM today, business was the sensible, surefire way to get a job upon graduation, and I wanted to make money. After slogging my way through introductory accounting and statistics, I was bored out of my mind, and I hated the rich, entitled kids in my classes. So I changed majors to political science. I wasn't sure what I would do with a political science degree either, but the classes stoked my imagination and had an urgent relevance to the world I lived in. In the summers, I went home and worked at a textile mill that taught me decisively what I did not want to do for the rest of my life. During the school year, as a part of my financial aid package, I was assigned a work-study job in the history department. I collected and distributed faculty mail, circulated job opening announcements for graduate students, built bookshelves for faculty members, and so on. I also spent a lot of idle time doing crossword puzzles or sleeping with my head on the desk. One day, the chair of the history department wandered by and saw a typed paper sitting next to my head. He grabbed it and told me to follow him into his office. After reading the 5-page paper that I had written on the Sandinista Revolution, he told me he was surprised that I could write and that I wasn't as dumb as I looked. As I neared graduation with few prospects, I told him I was planning to enlist in the military. Both my grandfathers and my father had served in the military. It was honorable work, paid decently, and would allow me to see the world. My mentor told me flatly, "You can't go into the military, you'll die." I tried to convince him that I was good with a gun, but he wasn't hearing any of it. So instead of going to Kuwait or Iraq, I went to law school for a year. There, I found myself reading history and philosophy when I should have been studying case law. So I moved back into my old room at my mom's house. I worked full-time at the airport, traveled to Europe and Latin America with the money I earned, and went back to school to get my teaching certificate to teach high school. I taught at West Charlotte High School for a year. I loved reading and teaching history, but I was more of a social worker in that setting than I was a teacher. I became frustrated. So I applied to go to graduate school, working with the same mentor who had shown an interest in me 6 years earlier. I had no idea how academia worked, but Colin Palmer gave me an opportunity and I never looked back. Altogether, it took me 3 years after graduating with my bachelor's degree to figure out what I wanted to do, and another 6 years to complete my PhD. When I finally got my first real job, I was 32 years old, married with a 5-year-old daughter, and $60,000 in debt. What a loser. What a loser. Parents, this is for you. The trajectory I've just laid out for you is probably your worst nightmare. But I would implore you to be patient with your kids. Trust yourselves and the ways you and your communities raise them. For our part, those of us who've taught your kids history for the past 4, maybe 5, 6 years, please know that we have taught them far more than names and dates, or even those literacy and critical thinking skills that my colleague Blair Boswell was so rightly talking about earlier. If we've done our jobs well, and I think we have, we've also endowed them with habits of mind like respect, vulnerability, compassion, and particularly leadership. The material details of history may disappear in their minds, but these habits will continue long after they leave UW and will serve them in whatever occupation they eventually choose. More importantly, these dispositions will make them informed, responsible, fully engaged global citizens. History teaches us to be restless, to assess the world with a critical discernment that is increasingly absent today. This restlessness, the desire to reconcile the irreconcilable, will help your kids pursue their passions, turning them into leaders, thirsty for knowledge for the rest of their lives. Eventually, this will pay, I promise you. If you need some evidence, there's a recent Wall Street Journal article that showed that median salaries for history majors, 10 years past their degrees, are on par with those who have biology degrees, information technology degrees, and nursing degrees. About $72,000, $73,000 10 years in today. Not a bad prospect. Graduates, you are entering a world of utter fantasy and make-believe. A world where Andrew Jackson was witness to the Civil War, and Frederick Douglass is going to be your next speaker, I promise you. It may seem as though your history degree is some kind of cruel hoax, but trust me, it's not. It's more valuable in 2017 than it ever has been. I commend you for your courage in choosing a major that will serve not simply to get you a job, but which will serve to cultivate your whole person. We desperately need your leadership now. Why? I mean, it should be obvious why. Some of us go through our daily lives believing that we are the center of our own universes, self-contained vessels of moral clarity and intellectual certitude, positioned far above the ignorance and stupidity that surrounds us. I'm not naming names. Some of them like to call themselves leaders. I think all of us suffer from this form of selfish hubris from time to time. We go through the tasks of our daily lives like robots, passing through time in our solitary default mode, prisoners of routine, and owners of the only facts that matter, ours. History's taught us better, but we still make mistakes, all of us. I would urge you to consciously cultivate the forms of discernment you learned in the classroom in your daily lives. When I was on my way to Washington a few weeks ago for meetings for the AHA, I was in my aisle seat early as others were boarding the plane. First one young person, then 5 minutes later another one, each wearing very large backpacks. It was spring break time. These large obnoxious backpacks. They walked down the aisle and pivoted quickly in the aisle, bashing my head like a piñata. Both were busy texting on their cell phones and had passed their assigned seats, so they were turning to go back. I wanted vengeance. But how do I know if those kids weren't coming back from a miserable holiday spent squabbling with relatives? or leaving to visit a dying grandmother. Moreover, how do I know I didn't perform some similar bad or negligent behavior myself when I got on the plane? Maybe someone was offering me a moment of grace as I was contemplating dragging the offending backpackers off the plane. And planes are a bad metaphor these days. But my point is that the routines of everyday life often numb us to our shared condition, pushing us further inward. We retreat into our televisions, our video games, our smartphones. Walking across campus here, you can go outside and witness this right now, I guarantee it. You'll see 3 or 4 people walking down the sidewalk together, clearly a group of friends, and they're all texting. Are you texting one another? Other people? When we avoid real, meaningful human conversation and connection, we imagine that we can insulate ourselves from grief, shame, heartbreak, fear. In fact, we're doing just the opposite. By denying our vulnerabilities, we also wall off joy, creativity, love, and happiness. There's something beautiful, I would even say sacred, in the fellowship of shared boredom, pain, and disgust. It's very difficult to do, and every once in a while I actually try to laugh when someone flips me off in traffic or elbows me aside in a security line at the airport. Why? Because these interventions jolt me out of my mind-numbing routines, reminding me of the foibles, faults, and errors that make us collectively human. There's a certain absurd humor to being caught all together in this funny matrix, yet trying our dead-level best to remain inside our own little bubbles, avoiding contact or collision. These points of connection, however crude or uncomfortable, draw us closer together and make our lives infinitely more interesting. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that you should ignore gross injustice or abuse, only that you should aim to understand the broader structures that create the forces of injustice. All of us value tolerance in the broadest sense, but simply opposing intolerance is not enough. Intolerance begins as a collection of individual choices aimed at those we fear, those we perceive to be our enemies. We must strive to make choices, and they are choices, that free us from blind certainty and self-centeredness. It takes extraordinary discipline to step outside of our tiny skull-sized worlds to cultivate the kind of empathic awareness and collective group orientations that history teaches. We achieve this common connection, this sense of recognition and belonging, by opening ourselves up and searching for goodness in those who slight us, anger us, or call us their enemies. The key to strong leadership is the empowerment of others, even the people we don't like. Of course, leadership also requires the constant celebration of our families, our teachers, our mentors, and our friends, those whose shoulders we stand upon. You can begin by honoring the sacrifices of the people who got you to this point. Some of them are probably sitting right next to you. Let me say this again. Honor the sacrifices of those who got you here. Thank them, elevate them, and as many others in the world as you can. It may take you a lifetime, as it seems to be taking me, but the challenges are worthwhile. Drawing inspiration from others and sharing in our collective successes is what makes us whole, makes us human, makes real history. Thank you again for the honor. Go lift somebody up.